This episode is brought to you by Ardan Labs Education. Sign up today to learn advanced concepts in Go, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and more. Visit ardanlabs.com/education for more information.
Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast, coming to us all the way from Sunnyvale, California, is Piyush Verma. Piyush, thank you, man, for joining us today.
Thanks, Bill. I've seen a lot of your work, heard a lot about you, and we've met in the past. Amazing to be here.
And we've met a bunch of times at conferences over the year as well, and we tend to run into each other, and that's our time to kind of catch up. And I thought you'd be a really great guest here for the podcast because you're somebody who's both in tech and very much kind of an entrepreneur. I think that's kind of cool, and I really wanted to kind of talk to you about some of that stuff as we learn more about your sort of history. But give everybody like a 2-minute sort of story around what you're doing today.
Thanks, Bill. Likewise, have met you at almost at conferences all over the Golang circuit. What we're building Last9. Last9 is a site reliability engineering platform. So we create a construct tools which help engineering teams overcome the SRE challenges. Now, traditionally, every time you have a software as your business grows, and as these softwares become complex, become distributed in nature, we end up resulting in situations where we realize reliability and availability of our applications is almost an aftermarket thing. Once it is built, then we try to do things to make them reliable and available. We hire a bunch of teams for this, and which we call them as SREs these days. I mean, thanks to Google, this term has almost become a commodity now. And then we build a handful of tools around it, or they build a handful of tools around it. Now, the trouble is, these tools almost feel like assembling things from IKEA every time. They're not readily available. There are smaller fragments, raw materials available out there, and then you assemble them to make a flavor of observability, reliability that you want to operate at. This is tedious. We cut that chase and we have built these tools. To give you an analogy, think what HashiCorp did for almost infrastructure as code. We try to build something very similar as tools for SRE needs. Now, one of our latest offering has been a whole time series database warehouse, which is built on top of the need that when you have metrics coming in from the application, there's a life cycle management that you need to perform. So, give you an example, these are the things that we do, and there's a lot more. I hope that gives an explanation of a quick rundown of what we do, or we can take that again.
It does. And before we jump into the time machine, I do want to ask you a couple more questions here, and then at the end we can ask more. I find the idea of SRE to be mysterious. Now, why am I saying that? Like, I'm a software developer. I build product. I know that stuff has to run in production. I know we have to somewhat sort of monitor that and make sure that it's working and then identify failures so we can fix bugs. But this whole idea of like reliability engineering has always been this abstraction to me. And I can't even imagine what I'm doing each and every day in that role. So I don't know if I'm the only one listening that has no clue what this actually means, but what is a person who's an SRE like? What is their day to day or week to week, and how much support do they need from developers in order to do their job?
To explain what SRE is, let me draw an analogy to civil engineering. You construct houses, and these houses have a guarantee of safety which is required. Now, let's take an example. I mean, hopefully, one doesn't have to face that, but let's take an example of these fire extinguishers, the fire part, right? Fire is a threat to civil engineering, to construct houses that we construct. There are firefighters who come in after things have gone bad. It's extremely talented, skilled people, extraordinary humans. We all know the stories that they do of how their valor and how their courage and their grit allows to save so many lives. But if we ever ask a fireman, what is the best way to deal with it? And the answer that they will give is the best way to deal with it is to avoid it in first place. This is exactly what SRE is. Extremely talented people who know how to deep down go into the deepest corner of your network, of your disk, or your CPU, and then solve those problems, which may be choking something, too many database connections, or IOPS running out, or a logic fault, or an AB deployment going bad, a red green deployment going bad, pods getting evicted. Could be anything. Could be a bad configuration of Go runtime. One place we are using CGO compiled binary, the other way we are not using a CGO compiled binary. Could be any of these things. And the best way to solve that is to avoid them. Now, this is the role of an SRE on day-to-day basis. First call of duty is to avoid a fire. Once it is there, actually solve a fire. Now it is there, I'm going to jump towards it. I'm going to do everything that can be done to mitigate that issue. Now it doesn't stop there. There are two more important functions that need to be performed. Second is, how do I make sure that this is not spread? I got to contain it. And this is extremely important because whenever you see a degradation or a downtime, it's quite inevitable that's going to spread across other places as well because it is a bad configuration, a bad code, or bad something somewhere. It's only a matter of time it shows up in other places. Quickly understand, think on your feet, remember your architecture, and understand, oh, this could be happening at other places as well, because you don't want every degradation to be solved reactively. You're going to use that as an immediate lesson to understand what else can go down. Third one is coming up with a strategy by which this can be avoided altogether. What do I need? What are those early warnings that I need? What are those leading indicators that I need? By which the next time I see this is happening, I can prevent an outage altogether. To draw an analogy back to firefighters, what they will tell you is the best way to avoid this is install sprinklers, is to build those fire detection alarms, those smoke alarms everywhere in the passageway, in the hallway, in the kitchen, so that you have a leading indicator to when something catastrophic can happen, because you can only minimize the loss, not prevent it. So at SRE, your first job and the foremost at the pinnacle of it is to somehow build enough tool chain and operability effectiveness so that you can avoid these to begin with. Does that give you an idea of what it does?
Actually, I love the analogy because I think my brain always was like, well, there's the fire is being caused by a bug in the software. It has nothing to do with networks and clusters and configuration. This bug just exists. You can't get rid of it. So, like, what is an SRE to do when the bug keeps causing the service to panic, right? You can't necessarily replace the code. Now, I like the idea of the detector up in the ceiling that's identifying that things this keeps happening, so we can jump on it. But my brain's always going back to if the code is crashing or causing problems, it has nothing to do with anything outside of it. How does an SRE deal with that situation? When does that developer have to get involved? And does the developer have to provide internal metrics for the SRE, or can everything be gathered outside that binary itself?
Great question there. And this is something that I actually get asked often. And one of the ways to look at this is, imagine there's an outage right now. I'll give you four options to pick from. One, you can go fix the code in real time. Assume I tell you where the problem is, right? Second, I give you ways to contain the spread of that. Now, containment could be done either as a scale up. You may decide, well, I can bump up the infrastructure by 3x in the moment because maybe this is a bad connection limit somewhere. Maybe it could be either of those. It's a wide variety of bugs that may happen. Third would be, there's an option to circumvent this code path as well. Now I'll go into the details of it. And the fourth one is to communicate. So one is a code fix, the other is to contain it, the third is to circumvent it, and fourth is to communicate about it. Now let's go into the details of what each one means. Containment would mean scale up, as we just discussed. Circumvention would mean, let's say I depend on a third party service and I realize that there is a logic fault here. I'm calling a payment provider or an SMS provider, and that thing has started failing. One of the ways, and could be a drastic one as well, could be we will bypass the OTP on login for a moment. We don't want our users to have bad experience. We'll simply say that this login flow would actually simply bypass it. I'll give you funny incidents that I've seen people do around it. One time I remember this website and they were depending on, I don't know whether it was Twilio or something for an outbound SMS, and that SMS had started failing. They had millions of users who were trying to log in at that point of time because it was a live media event. The SREs did a quick hack there. They said, what we'll do is we'll actually print the OTP right there in front of them at the login screen itself, because the external party is down. It's a security hack that they did, but they wanted users to come in. Now this is called circumvention, right? You want to just go, you want to bypass that whole bad flow altogether. Or these are things that hacks that you would deploy because you want to make sure that the users do not get impacted. And the last one is communicated. Assume you're B2B. I'm taking a wide variety of things here. Assume you're B2B. Assume I'm on the other side. I'm a payment provider. I know that one of my customers is getting impacted or a segment of my customers is getting impacted. I can reach out to them and say, hey, could you not use the debit card? And hey, can you use the credit card channel and give us an hour to fix this? In all of these four, you would realize the option number one, which is find the code and fix it in real time, is the least effective one. What is the most effective is actually the remainder of the three. And those are the first things that we always tend to ignore. As software engineers, we always think that the fault can always be solved by writing the code. Think about it. We're talking about 5 nines here, things that have to be up and running. Finding the code, fixing it, making sure the test harness runs, a continuous deployment happens, a CD job running, a GitHub action running. Oh, well, we are above already 20 minutes. 5 lines would mean you only have 4 minutes to react. Not possible. Is that capturing the imagination to see?
Dude, it's brilliant because I've never been able to imagine how an SRE could fix a problem without me giving them a code fix. But I guess if the infrastructure that you're running that code in is flexible enough, then you have options to do these other three things that you said. And in my head, I've never deployed my own sort of infrastructure for that to even be possible. I can't even imagine how you write, and maybe Kubernetes is part of being allow you to do that. But and I want to get to your story, but my brain's never been able to kind of formulate a picture, a visualization of how you could even do that. So this is brilliant, dude. I want to get back to this at the end of the show because I have more questions. But this is the best it's ever been explained to me. So hopefully others listening to this who are as clueless as I was about 10 minutes ago. Okay, we're going to get back to all of that. I think that's fascinating. And now I can imagine at some level some of the tooling that you're trying to help provide SREs so they can quickly deal with those three, choose one of those other three options, and quickly deploy something to help. Now, that's super interesting. But this is really a podcast about you. I want to know how you got to where you are today, that journey that you went through. So a couple of questions before we start. Kind of where did you grow up and go to school, like grade school?
So I grew up in a town next to New Delhi. This is the capital of India, and it was a small industrial town. My dad used to work there, and that's where I went to school and college and all of that before uh, well, our jobs take us to the rest of the world, and you never find remote was not a thing when we were growing up. So finding a job in your town, that to a software job, would have been impossible. So that's where I grew up. It's a quaint industrial town.
what year did you, I'm going to call it grade school. So what year did you finish grade school, that like last year before you went to university?
This is something very interesting, and I've not gotten used to it. So help me. Like, grad school is something that you go after your high school and the early part, right? Where you
Not grad, grade,
oh
not
oh
grad,
grade school.
grade,
Oh,
grade
okay,
school. So like kindergarten, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like in the States, it ends at 12th grade. And then you can apply to university.
got it. That was year 2002 that I
Okay,
finished that.
2002. Okay, cool. That just gives us a time frame for things. 2002. Okay, so here's my first question. Don't think too hard. Just kind of let it come naturally. Tell me that very first moment that you kind of worked on a computer where it was kind of magical, where you had this sort of like, oh my God, I can do this or that. Whatever that moment is. Like, do you remember that kind of first magical moment?
Absolutely. And I have a very distinct memory of that moment. And I'll tell you, it is very interesting that you asked me this question. Uh, I've sketched cartoons all my life. And growing up, I would do that, draw caricatures, like pick up a pen and a pencil. In fact, I'm carrying one right now in my hand as well. And, doodle, draw quick cartoons, etc., and all that thing. One thing that used to, and when you're sketching, what is important is three things: the medium on which you're sketching, the way you're presenting, and the lead, the pencil, everything makes a big difference, on how it's going to come out. That fine line becomes a gradient line, and with some anti-aliasing effect in there because the graphite smudges over, it's all amazing. If you try to take a photo of it and share it, it loses that effect. Like, something which is drawn on a double bond paper will never reach out the same way. Now, uh, but I mean, I was too young to realize it at such subtle level. And I got access to computers and I opened a website somewhere. And it just so happened, I don't know how it happened or why it happened. I, for a moment, I saw that on somebody else's screen as well, on a monitor. And what occurred to me was, there is somebody who's built something and it is being experienced alike. There is no loss in translation. There is no loss in experience. There's no loss in the feeling. An artist, I mean, I would like to call every software engineer an artist here. An artist imagined something, built something, people received it in the exact same manner. So if you got it right on your computer, that is exactly how everybody else is going to consume it as. And like, this is brilliant. This is lossless lossless work happening. So to a true artist, if they could capture their imagination and they could see it right then there in front of them, millions out there are going to see it the exact same way. And that's the moment I actually got hooked into computer science. And like, I got to learn this thing. I got to learn how do people build all of this, because if I had an idea somewhere and I could somehow build it, that is it. I'm just guaranteed that everybody else is going to consume it in the exact same manner. So the moment can be replicated for everybody. Does that kind of give you
A couple things. How old were you when you had that experience? Do you remember what grade or how old you were?
yeah, I was 16 when I had that.
Okay. I think this is the most amazing, fascinating, one of the most amazing, fascinating stories I've ever heard. You were, and I wish Eric was listening to this right now. So, Eric, even though nobody can hear or see you right now, Piyush is, he's 16. He's drawing sketches with pencil and paper, and he's frustrated that every time he takes a picture of it, it's not an exact representation of what he's drawn because the picture is losing some sort of detail in what he sees. Okay, and he's frustrated by that because he can't share his picture with anybody outside of a personal relationship that he has. He goes to a website and he notices that there's a website which is very and regardless what the website is doing, he realizes that somebody did this art, drew this page, laid out these words, did these things. And he has this light bulb that says, oh my God, every single person on the planet that comes to this page is going to see the exact representation, unlike what I can do today on pencil and paper with a picture. And that hooks him into this idea that if he can now do things on the computer, he doesn't have to worry about being disappointed that nobody can see the work that he's doing, and the level and quality and detail that gets lost in a, like, this is mind blowing. Eric, have you ever had that experience? Eric, and nobody can hear Eric right now, but Eric's one of the most amazing artists I've ever met. So I had to share the story like that with him. So nobody can hear there, but Eric is basically saying, yes, I've had a very similar experience doing traditional art and not being able to share the cool stuff that he did. And I imagine now, okay, so I've never been an art person. Dude, you just opened up light bulbs and doors for me. Like, you just blew my mind here, because I'm not an art person. When I have to go to an art museum, I just do it out of like duty, right? And I look at the pictures, and I'm not into abstract art. I like the ones that are really detailed and realistic, whatever kind of art that is. But I never realized I am now. Now I want to go to an art museum, because I never realized that I was losing an experience when I saw a picture of it, as opposed to looking at it live. And I'm going to start doing that now. I'm going to start looking at a picture of a piece of art, and then when I'm in front of it, and oh my God, dude, you just like changed my life with this whole idea of the detail that you lose unless you're there in front of it. But with the computer, every little detail, every little aspect, every little thing you did is there, because it's digitally being represented and it can be sent everywhere the same way. That's amazing. Amazing. Okay. And you're 16. So you're in the middle of kind of finishing your grade school. So how life changing is this? Like, does this kind of change your whole perspective now on what you want to do once you graduate grade school and start thinking about university?
To begin with, I would say it ruined me because when you're growing up and you have your plans, and nowhere in that plan it would show up as that, hey, I want to be a computer science guy one day, I want to be a software engineer one day, and you run into this and decide this is all I'm going to pursue. Now you got to convince your parents about it, the education that goes behind it, the infrastructure, the material, the internet, the computer that you got to procure so that you become an effective engineer as you learn. And so it does change the course of things. But I think that is what got hooked me into computer science. And uh, if you allow me to a moment to actually connect this same story to how I got interested in SRE as well, I think the passage is exactly the same. Should I go on and tell that as well?
No, I want to do that at the end. So at the end, I'm going to ask you I'm going to see if I make the connection. If I can't make the connection, I'm going to ask you, but I feel like I'm going to make that connection, which would be kind of a cool way to end this. But so what do you do now? You've got like 2 more years at least of grade school. You're now like, I got to get a computer. I got to start learning this stuff. Are there classes at school that you can now take? So what do you do for those now 2 years, let's say 16 to 18, to get yourself in that position to be able to do this?
Oh, so I actually went straight to college after that. So this was my grade 12 when I had this realization. So I went to college right after, and yeah.
Did you already? Okay, wait. At the moment you had this epiphany, had you already applied to school and taken the exams you needed to take, or it was just kind of right before that so you could start planning that out?
So this is very funny because the epiphany happened in a moment where I was downloading the forms of the colleges I had to apply to.
Things happen for a reason.
Yeah, so is during that hunt of what college should I even apply to, what forms do I need to download, is when I saw the website. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Yeah.
Dude, I got chills hearing that, man. I got chills, dude. This is like, wow. So what do you do next now? Now you start looking, you changed your direction at that point. What kind of schools were you looking? What kind of schools did you have in your head prior to that moment?
Uh, Mostly mathematics. wanted to take a major in mathematics. That was really something I loved. And if I would not have made it to a good mathematics college, I probably would have picked up something which was to do with fine arts itself.
Wow. And now you said, I mean, the math can still be important, but did that change your entire scope at that point? Now you wanted to do, say, computer science at that point?
It does, and it substantially did because the the amount of so back in India, how it works is that these colleges, these and at least the premier colleges have a thing called entrance examination. So you have to study hard for an entrance exam, which then you are graded on a score, and basis of which you get an admission into a tier of a college. The top tier obviously goes to the ones who have scored really well, and that's how the fall through happens. So this was now a mad rush to get into one of the topmost colleges the of the country, because if you want to do well, you want to go to the topmost college for it. And yeah, but this is where the race starts. At, oh, I got now a few months left on me, and I got to study hard for that entrance exam and try and make it to the top one that I can, which obviously, I mean, there are no fairy tales, which I did not. So, quite evidently, so from that point, because it's not enough, because other kids have been really working hard for a considerable amount of time, which is nowhere near to the effort that I would have put in the few months of mine.
So our last guest, Hannah, also grew up in India, and she said she had studied for like 2+ years for that exam because she wanted to get into a computer science program. And she scored something like, she was like ranked under 1,000, like ranked 940 out of like 150,000 kids. And she still couldn't get into the computer science program. Like if you weren't in the top 200, it wasn't going to happen. And she had been studying for like 2.5 years, 3 years for that exam. She ended up going into electrical sort of engineering, which was super interesting. So we heard that story, like kids starting at 14, 15 already studying for that particular exam to try to score into those lower rankings. So what happens now that you don't get that ranking that you need to get into the computer science program, which is super competitive, right? What do you choose to do next?
I think at that point, when I realized I haven't scored really well, I mean, if I would have, of all the people, Hannah would have been upset now that there's a kid who studies for a few months, scores well, gets computer science. I have been studying for more than 2 years and I don't get in. Uh, so I settled with like an okayish college, which was pretty close to my house where I grew up. And the idea was I want to do computers itself. And now there's a small intermediate turn in there that I still wasn't sure whether there was a career to be made. So I ended up picking mechanical engineering before computers. Now, I did that. I did study that for a little, and there is one of my college professors, and she found my love for computers, and she nudged me towards the fact that hey, I should actually switch my stream now, and this is not where I can ever make a career out of it. I mean, at that point of time, it was still a passion for me because I still wasn't sure, because it was a brand new love in my life that, oh, computers is something I want to do this, etc. But that nudge was enough for me to tip over on the other side and say that, okay, let's apply for a switch of a stream within the college itself, which also I ended up successful with. I don't know whether it was her peddling my file or was I genuinely worthy of a switch, but as one would never know the detail, I got a switch, I got access to computers, and that is where it began.
You found a back door into the computer science program, is
Yeah,
essentially,
that's
and being uh, historically now an SRE, that makes sense, right? You put back doors in, so you can travel between the matrix, man. So I think that makes total sense that you found that back door. So so this is a 4-year program now, right? You're in the computer science. Was it everything that you had hoped it would be, or was there any moment where you're like, you know what, this is not what I really want to do?
And this is again very interesting. The thing I wanted to do wasn't what I wanted to do. And so our college curriculum was split nicely into two halves every day. There was a half which was about lectures, and there was a half which was about labs. So you get free access to labs after that, and you can spend the entire rest of the day to do whatever you want. Now, I, I think I've been a very bad student all my life. It's very hard for me I want to learn things at my pace. I cannot learn in a competitive setting. Like you put me in a race with 10 other people, and I would be like, give up on the moment one itself or the word go. Things have to be understood well before I can take a claim that, okay, now I have learned this and I can actually take a shot at it, be it an examination, be it something. And I mean, and each kid has a different way of learning. I'm referring to me as a kid back, I mean, looking back at those years. Uh, so this was tough. And I think the lectures felt outdated to me in some way because what I was seeing in the lab and what I was studying in the classroom kind of looked disconnected. And when I said disconnected, I wasn't able to imagine how this leads up to that. Now, remember, I've been sketching. Feedback is very important for me. When I draw that graphite on paper, there is haptic feedback my hand gets. There is instant movement that I would get to know that okay, this is how it's going to come out to be. In absence of that cycle of feedback, it becomes extremely frustrating and limiting to imagine abstractions and just keep imagining them and hoping that one day they would connect into a thing called computer. And that is very frustrating, and that was one of the most limiting parts. And I think for a little period I struggled massively in college. Could not score good grades, was probably one among the bottom rankers, etc. But I think I was very fortunate to have both my college seniors, my college professors, they were all extremely supportive. They never let me get feel bad about the fact that, oh, just because you funked a few classes means that, oh, you gotta let it go, it's not good. No, they were very confident, and the camaraderie was great. And one of those incidents happened that in the lab, I got hooked onto a Linux file system, and I was dabbling with it. A couple of seniors were playing with it as well, and I saw them dabbling with a thing called network connection. I mean, now that I know what it is, but back then it only would look like a connector cable which is plugged into two computers, and they do something. Now another moment happens. I'm like, wait. So there's data in one computer, but you're accessing it via the other computer. And now able to imagine, oh, this is how a website works. Basically, I'm using data from somebody else's computer. I mean, I did not know it's called a server. I would just imagine it to be somebody's computer. So this computer, there's another computer, and you can access this data. And this is a moment where I got really latched onto the whole aspect of what networks are. And I think that was a moment that revived my interest in computer science again. That, oh, this is not as boring as it has been seeming for the past couple of years. There is much more to it, which is interesting.
It goes back to that moment that you had, like, wow. And now you're starting to see a little bit how that moment existed. The idea that you were connected to something and it came from another machine. You're starting to visualize the moving parts now. So I guess then you take a real interest in networking from that point on.
Absolutely. And before I learned any serious programming or writing software, I first learned the art of setting up computer networks. And from that point on, I think in the next 6 months, I gathered a couple of friends around me. And this was still early days. This was, I think, 2004 still. And our college had a very pedestrian network. Things weren't connected. The hostels weren't connected to the main labs. There was a lot of disconnected pieces. And uh, we came up with this proposal, and we proposed to our head of the department that, we're going to centralize all of this. We're going to connect everything to the network. Now, again, stroke of luck, things had to go right. Maybe they went right. The college head of department had no reason to believe us, a bunch of these kids and fools, but he did. And he said, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. Here is labs are open to you 24/7 from this point of time. And the next 6 months were a mad rush into learning how networking works, how Linux networking is, how file systems work, everything around it. And 6 months later, we could actually shift our entire network to a centralized set of servers with all hostels connected, all departments connected. And that is the real first exposure we got into seeing these things work connected, that internet that I had seen. Yeah.
Two questions. Two questions. One, was this connectivity SSH based, Telnet based, or were there some sort of web server stuff too where you were connected over browsers?
Oh, there was web server as well, because first of all, the network file systems had to kick in as well. So it wasn't just limited to just SSH. Everything became technically a thin client, because you don't want every other computer to have the disk and the storages, etc. So we said, let's bring up some massive machines out there, and everything around just becomes a remote login into the
Almost
machine,
like a dumb
because
terminal. Almost like a
everything
dumb
became a thin,
terminal in a sense.
absolutely thin client. Yeah.
Ah, nice. Nice. And then you would be able to access again the file systems and whatever little client applications were running on the thin client, you'd be able to access that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That made it
And
cheaper too, because now you didn't have to spend a lot of money to get that connectivity for another student. It was
absolutely. And all the college, the professors were happy, the kids were happy, because what they would do in a lab, they could just get off the machine, go back to the hostel, start their terminal, connect to the network, and resume everything. So it just changed lives for everybody from that point onward. And that is, I think that's the real moment where I realized the first time that how powerful this thing can be. So that was that moment where I saw, okay, this is how we imagined, this is how it is truly turning out to be, no loss happening.
okay. So a couple things. I mean, you're doing that while you're also doing your studies. This isn't some class. You're not getting credit for this. You're not getting paid for that, right? So how hard was it for you to like disconnect from this networking project to do the boring homework and class stuff that you didn't want to do, but you have to do because you got to graduate? I mean, you must have been struggling at times to focus on school.
Remember, once you latch onto a back door, never leave that back door. The same back door that got me into the system was the same back door that would assist me to circumvent the need for sitting in a classroom. Because if you're spending your entire nights in a lab, there's very little energy that you're going to be left with to attend the classroom. So the professor was kind enough, and she could see the work that we're doing, and somewhere they took upon the belief that these kids will are doing the right thing. So they allowed us to skip lectures.
Wow. I mean, what you were doing was a massive service for free. I'm putting in quotes for the university. I mean, like you should have gotten some credit or something for. And were they shocked the first time you connected a thin client to the right? Because they're thinking, yeah, we'll just give these kids some access, nothing will happen. I mean, the first time you showed the director or the head of the department that you got some of this working, what were their reactions? Were they just trying to act cool, like, yeah, of course, or were they like, wow, you're starting to pull this off?
I think it was the confidence we could see in in them, because I say this, and sorry, this is kind of off topic, but I say this, like, we as humans are wherever we stand today, or I mean, I'm sure this is true for almost all of humanity, wherever whoever stands, is a lot of chances and luck going right. No matter how much we say that, we are all self made, we are this and that, but a lot of these things just happened to happen. And we are only fortunate and lucky to be in those moments where they aligned well. Yes, I mean, a lot of credit to us that we gathered those moments, etc., but we cannot really deny the fact that it's just a lot of things that happen by chance that happen to us. Like luck has to align with it. And again, I'm not saying everything to destiny, etc. No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there's things that we don't control, and they happen and they align, and we happen as a part of it. I think in that moment, if I go back, I don't think anybody can rationalize that moment. Was the head really believing in whatever we are saying? They believed their gut, they took a punt on us, they placed a bet, and when they saw it coming, I think we all then start committing to it more. When the first time the computer would have connected and we would have resonated and we said, hey, here's what we got working, maybe the person saw something that, that okay, if they can push a little further, maybe they can do more. I won't claim to say that, oh, we had imagined this is how thin clients would be, because we never knew what these things are. We were figuring it out. We were trying to read books from library because internet was still a new age thing back then. So we would read what's there in the library, hope to find something which is there, which can assist us, get past that, gather those. I mean, back then, Ubuntu installations used to come on those CDs. Try to do that, figure those things out, and things just fall in place one after the other. And a lot of these experiments failed. I think what helped us and what helped the head as well, to answer the question, things not working did not deter us. We were just a rampage onto it, that something will work, something will not work, something will work, something will not work. The whole passion and curiosity of it just led to one thing after the other. So what I'm saying is, I don't want to take a claim to say I'd imagined a thin client and I got it. No, absolutely not. We got lucky to keep moving forward and not get deterred by any external factors.
So I had a seventh grade teacher that would beat me in ping pong at recess every day. And I would say to him, yeah, you got lucky in this game. And you know what he would say to me every single time I said, you got lucky? He goes, Bill, you got to be good to get lucky. And I've never like forgotten that. So when the kids tell me I got lucky, I'm like, oh, you got to be good. You got to be, and there's some truth to that, right? Like you got to be good and there and present to get to that moment where you got lucky, that you found that thing that helped work. And those are the magical moments that get you through all the heartache and heart pain when things aren't working. To like, you want that moment, you keep working towards that moment because it's such a high in that moment when something works. You just want to keep having it over and over and over again. It drives it. You're now like a Linux VAX mainframe connectivity guru at this point as you graduate university. So is your thought coming out of this undergraduate degree to get into the workforce, or are you thinking I'm going to continue to get more education? What's your thoughts as you're now about to graduate?
Another really funny thing happens after this. So, as a part of our curriculum, we are supposed to spend some time in the industry for some industrial training, and this is just what as a part of the curriculum was. Like you got to spend 6 months or a year into it. Now, in this moment, I had a friend, and we are all applying for internships, etc., here and there. But I'm so into this that I don't want to go too far distracted into something. Now, there's a friend of mine, and his brother knows somebody in something. I don't know what these things are, because now I know they're called startups. So but back then, like from what I heard, like, oh yeah, I got a friend, my brother has a friend, and they're working on something, and they're looking for a kid to help them out with certain stuff. And so I checked with this guy, hey, are you gonna take up on that? He says, no, man, it looks too small. They don't even have an office, etc. I'm like, okay, I mean, doesn't hurt. I can go. So I walk into these bunch of people. I enter a room, It was a rented apartment. There were four people sitting in a room, and feels very much like a lab. And they ask me, "Who are you?" I impersonate to be that friend, and I say, "I'm that guy."
No way. At some point, you got to tell them you're not, but go on.
Yeah, so like I'm that guy. And they're like, "Okay, what do you do?" I'm like, so I mean, and I'm impersonating him. So I say, I have a brother, and I'm so foolish because I'm a kid that I'm like, I have a brother who sends me here. Now, obviously, the guy knows the brother and the friend as well, but well, who am I? I'm just a young kid, right? So, got nothing to lose. We don't think through these failures.
Oh my God. Oh my God. They know you're not that person. Oh
Absolutely.
my
Of
God,
clearly
dude.
they know. They clearly know it's not me. So.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, what brings you here? I heard you guys do this thing, and they were building and this was back in 2005. They were building a SMS-based banking system, and pretty new age for that time. And I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, I don't know what this does, but I've been like, I know you do stuff with computers. I know have some computers background. I want to learn and see how it works. Like, cool. Show me what you got. And like we start talking, and uh, I did not know much about Python back then. I mean, I had just seen it that hey, this is a scripting language. I can do some stuff with it. And I open VI and I write certain shell scripts, and we are discussing. It's just a quick exchange. Guy's not grilling me because obviously he's amused at first I'm lying about my name, and now he just want to go through the conversation, and he talks about it. Now the interesting thing is I open VI, but I don't know how to exit VI. So yeah, so I open it up, I write some stuff. So the guy gets a hang of it, right? And he says, "Cool. You wanna intern with us? Cool. You come. You can start."
And by the way, what's your name?
So I mean, the guy's kind. The guy's very kind. You know. So I show up as that other guy for the next 3 days.
What?
Uh, yeah,
Everybody's
and
calling you by this other guy's name for
by
3
this other
days.
guy's name. Yeah,
And they're
for three
just waiting
days.
to see how long you're going to play this out. Oh my God, dude.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And the third day, I feel bad about this. I feel so horrible and disgusted about this. I say that, guys, I lied. That's not me. I said, we know who you are and we know that who you are not. So stop pretending.
Wow. What's the life lesson learned there?
I'll tell you the life lesson learned. When I tell you the next detail. So this guy is actually no ordinary bloke. This guy is actually one of the first authors of KDE. His name is Sartaj Singh Kang, and he was back in his Melbourne University. He started writing KDE along with a bunch of other folks, three other folks. So he's one of the earliest contributors. So a very humble gentleman who obviously like was already deep into the world of Linux, open source, KDE, and actually sees me. I don't know what he sees. Maybe he just sees a young kid who's trying to fool around. And the life lesson learned there is is there are things that you do when you see a spark in thing, and this is what I continue to use when I hire people today. When I see these young engineers come in, there's that moment that I'm looking for. There's this spark in them, that this how would I say it, unassumed pressure to do something well that they have. And that is what I'm looking for in people as well. And I think the guy actually showed a lot of confidence in me one that moment. And then he nudged me towards Google Summer of Code, etc., because technically I was still a part of college and I could continue to contribute there. And I think that's where my engineering journey started. I wrote the first Python parsers of the KDE environment, and just went deep into those systems, got hooked on to the world of open source, contributing, understanding how these communities work. And I think that was a pivotal moment to shift towards computer science engineering quite late into the college. So I learned networking, I learned a bit of scripting, I learned a bit of fundamentals, but never really got a hang of writing full blown software until then.
So I think what this guy is showing you as an older, say more mature sort of human being and engineer is that he saw a kid who really wanted to work there and didn't know any other way to get in, and allowed that to happen until you were ready to finally admit it. Like if you had gone 2 weeks, then I think it would have been bad. I think the fact that you went 3 days was like, okay, like, and I appreciate that. If I was that person who I am today, I would have done the exact same thing. I would have allowed you to play it out, see how long you were going to take it. But it just proved to me how bad you really wanted to be. I'd rather have somebody who really wants to be there than somebody who doesn't, right? I think that's what they saw. I mean, obviously we don't want to lie, but you did what you felt you had to do to get in there, which I think is interesting. But that's an internship while you're in university. So what happens now that as you graduate? Do they Are they capable of hiring you? Is that gig over? What
Yeah, and like I continued working with them for almost a substantial amount of time till the 2008 crisis or a meltdown happened. Somewhere during that period, I completed my degree, etc., and all that. It happened on the side because now I was so hooked on to working that I'd lost all thoughts of that. Yeah, there's a college back there to complete as well.
did you end up graduate? Did you get the degree?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
just kind of did
absolutely.
it part
Yes.
time.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
did it part
During
time.
during the process, I completed that. Yeah.
Plus, they were paying you at that point, then, right? So this was like a paying job.
I mean, I didn't ask for money to be honest. But I mean, I didn't. I mean, I thought that like as long as it covers my commute and my food expenses, I'm good. But uh, I mean, if I look back, it was yes, it was my first paying job. You could think of it like what must it be back then? I think $40 a month.
But you didn't need more. I mean, maybe. I mean, you could have had more than that, but you didn't need more than that. And the experience you were getting at the time was so valuable. So
Is amazing. Is invaluable. Like it's and I think that is very important because at that point of time you're not doing it for money or anything. You're doing this because there is so much fun that you're having in getting those things built. Like again I go back to the part when you're building something, you're building because you want to build it. You so want to build it. You're not concerned by, hey, this is what the value of the outcome is going to be. No, like I want to spend that time learning how to get this thing done because that's the most important thing.
but you still have to be able to support yourself. So you have to be able to have a place to sleep and buy food. You don't have to be driving a Porsche, but
Yeah.
like you still have to have enough to sustain for the things you needed. So were you living at home at the time then, or was $40 a month enough to have a flat, roommates, food?
Oh, no, no, absolutely not a flat, crashing with friends and occasionally going back home as well because many a times I would end up pulling all-nighters at work because the work just got so much of me that I could not stop writing software. I just loved it so much that there was no point. The thought of being away from it, I know it sounds like very like like movie style, but it's not. Like once you find something, you get hooked on to it. You don't want to get away from it.
This is the third time I'm going to use this analogy, and I've used it on the last few podcasts because my wife started a boot camp, and it's the only way I describe it. It's like crack cocaine. You got hooked,
Absolutely.
and you got to keep having the high, and it takes a long time to learn how to get your life balanced again, especially when you're in your 20s, because you got nothing really else going on necessarily, and you just hooked. You want the high. There's a high to it.
Yeah. So in fact, now when I look back, I mean, now this is the second important life lesson I got from this guy. He would push me out of office every weekend, and say, I don't want to see you here, and he would make it sound like, you're consuming too much office time, you're consuming office coffee, like there's too much internet. No, we got to shut down, we got to go somewhere. Because what he's trying to do is he's trying to put real world into my perspective, that, don't get consumed by it so much that you lose what the real life is. And yeah, I thank him for that. I thank him in I don't think I can thank him enough. But if I look back, I realize that how subtly he was placing these life lessons into my head. That while it's important to be consumed by what you love, but it's also important that you have a real life that you got to pay attention to. And in some way or the other, your friends, your people. Yeah.
I'm like him. I didn't have people around me in my 20s. You'd meet somebody who says, "Hey, your life, you gotta balance your life." And my brain was always like, "No, I need to make money right now. I got a house, I got kids, I got." Um, and it's not until you get into your 40s at some point we start realizing, man, how much life did I lose trying to get where I'm at right now? And I'm happy where I'm at, but how much of life did I lose sitting in an office? And it's probably him also having that regret of not listening, but having an opportunity, not saying it to you, but forcing you into some quality balance of life while you're there.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you a very sneaky way how he did it. He banned laptop into the office. Now, if you shut the office and desktop is the only way, then I'm dishooked from it, right? Like I'm unhooked. Now there's no way I can have access to a computer. And so again, I got irritated a couple of times, but I think I had too much respect to say that, if a person says something, it might be for the best of my good.
So now 2008 hits. We have a financial crisis all over the world thanks to really bad investments around bad mortgages. Um, you're, I guess, at that point out of a job. So what happens in 2008?
I mean, by the time the acquisition had happened, and I was just an intern with them. Effectively, they had no reason to be benevolent, but they were. So I mean, when the acquisition happened right before 2008, they were benevolent enough to have a good payout. And at that age, while the crisis happened to affect the company, but the payouts had already happened, and so it kind of leaves you with enough confidence into a thing that startups can be the way of the world going forward. So that thing had entered my head now. That in a way, you're still young. Like I was probably what, 22.
25,
Uh,
26. Oh,
22. Yeah, I think it was
2008.
22. Yeah. So I'm 86 born, so I was 22. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. 2002, you graduated there. You would have been about 17 and another 8 years. All right. That's fair.
Yeah. So 22. And I get this idea in my head that, I'm again looking back, if I go back into that age and I think, why am I doing something next? Is I want to be this guy. I've seen him do things. I'm really in awe of this guy, and that is how you pick up mentors in life. That you want to emulate some bit of theirs because you're too young and too raw to have a personality of your own. So you kind of start absorbing reflections of what others are around you. And I want to be with this guy. I'm like, yeah, I mean, if he's good at technology, and he does this thing called a startup, so must I. Like, and that is, monkey see, monkey do. So that is a phase that we are in at that point of time. And so I decide to get into this and have an idea of my own and start doing things. And I started dabbling with a couple of ideas around here and there for the next couple of years until I hit.
But you have cash. You have cash from the payout that's gonna give you the opportunity to do it. So now you're like, okay, this is the way it works. Everybody, and I heard this story from Hannah too. It's like everybody in university goes off and tries to basically start it in a startup. I met these people, they were doing a startup. I met those people, they were doing a startup. It's almost like your first job out of university is almost startup, unless you go to Samsung or maybe you do that in your second job. But I feel like almost everybody's trying to build something almost out of university, out of these engineering schools. So what's the idea for, so you decide you're going to tinker around for a couple of years trying to find a product, but my guess is your real world experience domain is either networking or whatever domain they were working on, right? So what is it, what problems are you kind of prototyping over these 2 years that you thought would be potential businesses?
So, and along this way, because exposure was either writing these server space. Now it was either networking or even in this startup because they were doing banking over SMS. All jobs oriented towards either writing these performance, Solaris systems, writing parsers, compilers, because you want to deal with these SMSCs or asterisk gateways, etc. So very largely absolutely back server space, infrastructure, those kind of problems. So very lucky to actually have hit infrastructure problems right in early in my career, because when you start on the other side, you do a lot of application development, but it takes a lot of journey to transition to the other side to understand how does this really tether back into those green, blue blinking light ropes, as I would say it. But if you get exposed to it sooner, the imaginations become clearer in your head, because now you know exactly how things move, how the wiring is done, how the data transfer, what protocols are, yada yada. I continue to dabble around that, and this is where I had a very audacious thing to do, because obviously neither did I have the skill to do it at that point of time, nor was the technology right to do it. We were trying to convert audio to text synthesis. So when you speak something, can you translate it into text? And that was an idea.
Why that problem? I know people were working on that problem in the late 90s because we were doing some IVR stuff with phone and voice detection.
Exactly
We were
that.
doing that in the late 90s with tech that already existed. But why that problem now, 10 years later? Why 2008, 2009, you want to work on text to speech essentially, right? Or speech to text?
SMS was limiting. It could only take 160 characters, 140. Now, because of this SMS banking, I'm like, oh, this is so limiting. Like I have to pull out the phone, type these 140 characters. All I can write is 140. I can just say it, pay bill $2. Like,
Oh, you want to do that on the phone?
yeah,
Oh, run it, build. Wow. But you got to integrate that with the existing chat. Okay, I mean, this is a lower level integration into the phone. So you can have that option to speak chat to any app as input.
that's correct. Because if I could first solve that problem, I could solve other problems with it, because this itself was missing as a tool. And the underlying facility was absent, or I did not know of it in a consumer manner, that there was easy to consume things that I could just deploy and get this going with. There was none. I mean, I do remember there were media streaming servers at that point of time, Red 5, etc. They had come in, using Flash. You could start recording audio, send that to server space to process. So some of this basic stuff was there, but the synthesis was not freely available to be done.
Yeah, no, I mean, in 2008, this isn't an easy problem. Compute problem on the phone, networking is slow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and integrations. So you played with that for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and that wasn't gonna work. Me and my co-founder, as they would say it, I mean, we're both highly underskilled. If you look back, there was no reason it could have worked. If it did, it would have just been pure fluke. So that didn't go out well. We could not really build at a level that we wanted to, and that's the first time that we got hit by this idea that you got to sell something as well. You can't just keep building it, and the sellability aspect of a product was a realization that I had for the first time. I mean, until now I only knew there's technology. I never knew that when you have to think of these startups, there are two parts to it. There's a product, and then there's a business angle as to it as well. I mean, there's technology and there's business, and the product unites them both. This is a realization that I did not have. And I don't think this is a realization I had going still late into my career, for a little longer as well after that. And but the viability, the business aspect of things started to hit me, that I gotta spend some time learning these as well.
Yeah, because one of the first questions I always ask someone when they tell me they're in a startup is, what's your revenue model? How do you plan on somebody giving you $1? I don't need $1 day one, but by year three, how are you going to get somebody to give you $1? Because somebody's not going to give you $1. It's not viable, and that's what you're realizing. I need a revenue model that occurs in a reasonable amount of time, and I like the idea of $1. Are you willing to give me $1 for? Are you willing to give me $10 for that? I mean, how many dollars are you willing to give me for that pain point that you're having, right?
Yeah.
So
So
2008 through 2010, you're dabbling. 2008, 2010, you're dabbling. You realize that tech isn't going to work. Plus, there's no revenue model around that. So what happens now in 2010 after you kind of go through those 2 years?
So one of the co-founders of the earlier startup where I was interning or impersonating to begin with, uh, he reaches out and he's looking for a co-founder to start an ed tech idea.
Say that again. Edge tech.
Ed tech, education tech. So
Oh, education.
2010.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha.
This idea is very interesting because he says, I want to build because, and he starts off saying that, you know what? Nobody wants to learn in a competitive environment. And that line was enough for me to hook back into my journey. And that's where I started, right? Because I've been a bad student. I'm like, yeah, I get it. What you want to say next? I so get the problem that you're telling me that people want to learn at their own pace. And there is so much to learn via soft skill training, etc., which cannot be taught in a formal setting. So the entire business and product was around that. So for the next 4 odd years of my life, I spent doing that.
You're building is it like a platform like what is Khan Academy today? A platform where you can have materials that you can learn at your own pace, and that kind of. So what was the name of that platform you built, and what happened after 4 years?
It was called seminars.com. You say a seminar, but change the first E with an I. And that was what our company was called. So we basically, yeah, so co founded that, worked with on that idea, raised some amount of funds as well to live into it. Did that for 4 odd years, but didn't really work out well for X number of reasons. And so that was the next 4 year of my journey, trying to understand what product, what business, and how do things evolve. And as from the
So give me two kind of core reasons why that ended up not working out. What was it that you look back now on and say we missed the boat on this, or we just didn't do that?
one was so there was this moment. So we had a large customer who went online, and in the next 10 minutes or so, or 15 or so, we managed to hit a 1 million hits on the website. And that is how crazy it went. But because we weren't ready for that kind of scale, the site crashed. The and uh, for no obvious reasons of the for a logic fault, but actually the scale fault, we couldn't scale that up. So we could not. So we had pegged too much on that moment that, hey, we're gonna raise venture capital after this thing goes well. Let's launch it. This is gonna be viral. We'll build a vibe so that we're too protective of the equity by then, and said, we don't let go. Let this hit well. We'll gain some momentum. Udemy, etc., were still coming up at that point of time. This was back in late 2012, etc. And so, or Coursera as well. These things were just picking up at that point of time, and we could not hit it. So we kind of lost that moment. And that is one thing that, I mean, obviously I could not have changed given my own our understanding or a lack of anticipation that we're going to go so viral. That was one pivotal moment that I could actually say on a thing that where we failed to pick that momentum, and that ripples further, right? Because now you don't have that, so your plan of having raised any venture capitalism later would not work out because you were so pegged on this single moment, so that didn't work out. So that was one. And two, I would say, is that overall understanding of how to build lean products would be another self introspection. If I look back and understand why did it not work the way it would have.
It's really hard to close the door on these business, especially when it's 4 years sort of your life and your time and any money you also put into it. So what made you finally just close the door on it? What was your How did you finally close the door? You said, I'm just not working on this anymore. We're done.
Uh, during the course, I got married as well during this journey, and I've been with that person for a fairly long time, and she is very supportive, and like always been supportive of my fascinations, my ideas, my pursuits, etc. And she raised this question that I don't think this is working out for you. You are because what ends up happening is that uh, and this is what the hard part of being an entrepreneur that nobody tells you, that you become a socially irritable person because you are starting to measure you as your business outcome. We tend to see our failures, our business failures, as our failures. It becomes personal. You walk out into a social setting, the first person when anybody asks you is, hey, what are you up to these days? You go into a shell. You think that you have failed yourself, everybody around you, and that everybody is after you. You become irritable, you become cranky, and like your personality and demeanor changes for the bad. It becomes so deep rooted into you that that scar tissue, that even when it heals, it's a mark out there, and takes a lot of time and an era to come out of it. And when that starts happening, people who are close around you, they start giving you this perspective, and that it's changing you, who you are as a person. And now it's maybe time to not look at that, and do something else, because it's consumed too much of you, and you don't want to the inevitable outcomes will become only worse from this point on. So if you're able to understand what I'm saying.
Oh no, dude, that is, it's a great point, and it's so true. And when my first business failed, originally my ex-wife did not want me to start the business. She wanted me to stay as a salaried employee. And I told her, there's no way I'm going to be able to support 5 kids as a salaried employee. I need to try to become an entrepreneur. And when that business failed and we were like several $100,000 in debt and underwater, it made that my relationship with her even worse, because all she could do is look at me and say, I told you, I told you, I told you not to do that. I told you. So all the people that are kind of giving you the negative when you start something are now waiting in line to tell you, I told you so. And it just makes it even worse, because it just compounds the idea that I just failed and I got to start. And for me, it was, I'm 40 years old and I got to start over, and I got 5 young kids, right? Um, and I did. I started over, and I've had to start over twice in my life, because after divorce, you basically lose everything too. So I'm not afraid of starting over anymore, because if you stay positive and you don't give up, you know, like you were saying, opportunities will come your way, and you have to just open up those doors when they come at you. So I fully appreciate what you're saying, because you're right. That's a great way to measure it. I never thought about that, and having somebody in your life that's able to say to you, hey, you're turning into a vampire. You used to be happy and fun to be around, and now you're sucking all the happiness out of the room. Maybe it's time to change. You finally decide, that's it, this has to end. You do that. Now, after my first business failing miserably, I went back to become a salaried employee, because I had to try to make enough money, all right, to pay mortgages and food and all that. And I did that for 2 years. It was a tough 2 years of my life, going back and just being an employee again. And 2 years, then we started Arden after that, which was scary. But did you do the same thing? Did you kind of then just kind of jump back into being an employee? What did you do after that first business? You had to finally walk away.
Yeah, so when I did that, I took a smallish kind of break, and I think I mentioned this in the earlier part of our chat. You have to be lucky to meet the right people, and I think if I look back, I've been really lucky to meet all kind of amazing people all my life. And they've been very supportive and amazing. And this is where I met another friend uh, so he's a Dutch guy. He had an office very close to our office. We were 2 floors above each other, uh, and very supportive as well through the journey. Now, obviously, he could see this, like, hey, this is not working out, and he said, why don't you? and he kind of knew how this works because he's kind of 5 6 years elder to me, and has been in this space of entrepreneurship all his life, so he knows how this works out, right? So in his own way, without making it sound like a favor, he basically goes about saying that, like, while you're still figuring it out, why don't you come and help me out? I need a lot of help in my work. Like, you're a technology guy, you like dabbling with technology, I'm doing this thing, so why don't you come over? Subtly, he's basically pumping uh, cash into my life, and and helping me recover from that whole thing. And not as a favor, because in process of it, he knows that I like technology, so I'm actually going to start getting consumed with something and then start getting distracted in the right way. So yeah, I do that for with him for a good, I would say 6 8 odd months, till, or maybe 9 months. I don't even remember the time frame. Uh, we travel around. We went to like, go places around in Rotterdam, Amsterdam, see those places around. It takes a good break from me in my life, from what I was doing, and helping me recover from that entire situation. And uh, off when I was ready, he was himself the person who said, maybe you should do something nicer now, you know, and like, this is, you're not going to build these applications for the rest of your life. Like, maybe you can start doing something. So, like, and at that moment, I realized that, oh, actually, I mean, he's a very close friend of mine. That, oh, he was just basically helping me get back on my feet.
So two things there that I want to kind of make points around. These are things I try to teach my kids kind of all the time. The universe is constantly wanting to balance itself and bringing people into your life all the time. You have to be open sort of to receive them. But the other thing, which is so important, and it's really hard when you're 19 and 20, if anybody, like, you think you could do everything on your own. You can't. If people are offering you help, you have to say yes to it. When I first met my current wife, she was very much somebody that would get aggravated if she had to get help from somebody. And I had to teach her, you have to stop this attitude. If somebody's offering help, accept it. Even if they're not going to do something exactly the way you want it done, your life's going to be better for it. And this is what I'm hearing, right? This person came into your life just at the right moment. You could have said no, but you said yes, and you took the help, and it helped you over that year to kind of recover. That's to me the story here, like being humble enough and knowing when you have to say yes to help, even if you don't want it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, uh, you you have to allow people to hear their perspective and see it from them, and it can't be just consumed by. And again, it's very tough in that moment too, because you are in that negativity, right? Remember, like, coming out of a failure of a startup, you're trying to see that, oh, is this guy trying to prove a point, etc. So it just happens that you tend to trust somebody and it works out well. So yeah, I mean, as I said, I probably got lucky again. Surely.
I had that movie Yes Man with oh god, now I can't remember the actor's name, but I had
Jim Carrey was.
yeah, Jim Carrey. So the 15-year-old, I'd say about 8 months ago, went into this sort of no mode. Like everything was no. Didn't want to do nothing. So I had her watch the movie, and then I said, for the next month, I want you to try to say yes more. I mean, obviously, don't say yes to everything. If it's immoral and ethical, we're not saying yes. But I want you to say yes more. If it's not unethical and not immoral, and it's just you just don't want to do it, I want you to do it. She literally did that for a good month and a half, and she had to admit that her life was maybe a little bit better, right? She had more experiences. She went back into wanting to say no more, but at least for that moment in time, she got to experience not saying no to just about everything. I think it was cool.
I totally relate to that. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
we got like 15 minutes left, and I want to get to how you get to last nine. When did you start this company, Last Nine?
This was 2020. In a couple of process, there were a couple of startups, a couple of exits. We can skim past that because there's something that interesting in all of this. Like, now, And this goes back into my first exposure with computers, right? Like we're speaking about moment all the time, like, and how I articulate this. And maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but this is very important because in there was that moment when I loved computers. There was that moment when I saw the network. There was this moment when we lost the business. Like goods and bad, their moment. This whole space that we are in, like this distributed apps, this computing, these mobile apps that we have. Come to think of it, right? All of these are trying to capture a moment of your life. You want to pull out your phone and you want to tweet in a moment. You use Instagram, you're seeing a cute pet or your kid or somebody or sunset. Pull out your phone and you want to put that photo. You want to order some food. You're feeling something in that moment, right? You wanna order a food because you're feeling that taste in you with you. You wanna consume that. And this is very moment, in the moment. If the moment is lost and the transaction isn't made, it may or may not come back for the user or the business. This is why modern businesses, modern software relies too heavily on these moments we converted because they have become a part of our lifestyle. In that moment when I decide to watch a movie on Netflix, I'm pressing a button and there's an experience that's going to consume me. If that video doesn't play, I may go out and play with my friends, a baseball or a snooker or cycling. I may lose the thought of it altogether because that is how we are these days, right? In all of this. So it's important for all of these things that we do that inevitably all of us are trying to capture these moments of magic, moments of epiphany, a moment of celebration, a moment of desire, a moment somewhere. And which is important that they have to be reliable because that is where we lose as a business, and that is where the idea of being more and more reliable as a modern software started hitting me, because earlier I could not explain why are these nines, what is the fascination about it, but when I translate it this way I understand that why does a business have to be up, because if you lose those moments, those customers may not come back ever to you and may look for an alternate solution. And who knows what happens in that moment to the other? Like maybe they start liking the other platform better. Like in that moment when Uber doesn't work and I go to Lyft, maybe I become a Lyft customer thereafter. I don't know. Like you don't know. And that is the whole. Now, to do that, there's this chaos. People watching dashboards all the time, trying to make sense of graphs of one of those three possible outcomes that they could have achieved, either contain, circumvent, or communicate, like of a failure, because obviously code fixes are hard to do in a real time. And that tool chain to be built is very custom, time consuming, takes at least 4 or 5 member team north of $1 million expenditure even before you can actually build an internal tool chain which can help you take those decisions faster. All of that can be productized, can be short circuited, and that is the belief with which Last9 was born, that we got to productize these tool chains that are inevitably built in house by these large companies to capture this software essence, which is constant 24/7 uptime. Does that kind of explain?
It does. And the analogy that I kind of bring to this is I'm going to bring it into sports in Miami. For those people who are sports fans, Miami is the worst town for sports fans. I feel sorry for all the sports that operate here, because if you're not winning, like championship level winning, nobody's coming to the event. And when I talk to people here, and this is different, like if you're in New York or Green Bay or smaller, say, sort of markets where the sports team is central to almost life. In Florida, it's just one other thing that you can do here. And so if they're not winning, then I could go on my boat. I could go do this. I can go do that. There's like a million things you can do here. So why should I spend time going to a game when they're losing? That's not a good experience I want to have. It's not a way of life like it is in other places. I find that sad because I love sports, right? But it's the same thing. If the Netflix button didn't work, well, I've got 20 other choices. I've got Disney, HBO, Hulu, whatever it is, right? We all subscribe to at least 4 or 5 other sort of streaming services. So am I disappointed I couldn't see that movie? Of course I am. But at the same time, I'm going to get over it fairly quickly because at least today there's so many other choices. I know when I was a kid, there weren't many choices. I had 3 stations on my black and white TV when I was in middle school, and I had to settle on whichever one was a clear picture. That was it, right? And you would settle. There's no settling anymore, right? You quickly move on. So that moment you're talking about in terms of consumer choice, right? When you got that consumer right there and you don't satisfy that request, this is real estate. The whole real estate industry now, from a compute perspective, is about the first person that gets the lead, that reaches back out to that person on the lead. I might be interested in something real estate wise, and I'm putting my email in and I'm filling out forms. If they don't get back to me within a minute, they've lost me because I've already talked to somebody else who did. So this moment you're describing is so critical in today's world because nobody has patience. We want everything now, and if we don't get it now, there's not like immediate gratification. We're moving on to somebody who will give it to us. So yeah, right. That's you're burning territory in seconds, not days anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, great analogy. I'm going to use that, and yeah, and that's exactly how Lassen was born, and so this was start of 2020.
Yeah. So what you're trying to say is, look, I've got the tools that are going to keep fires at bay, and I have the tools that are going to help you be able to respond to your customer before anybody else, only because your system's going to be up longer and be more responsive longer throughout the day, so you don't lose that lead, you don't lose that interaction, you're fulfilling the self gratification that that person wants.
Absolutely. And how do you do that? With those smoke sensors. At the first sight of a potential hazard, you're basically looking for bad signs and you deploy them everywhere, like through your infrastructure, at the mouth of the gateway, at the CDN. Here's where a service degradation is happening, where it never used to be 98% at this time of the day, but today it is. Something's gotta go wrong. Have a look. These are those early warnings that you deploy all over the system because make sure nothing reaches that moment. And that's what the whole reliability is about. Like whenever people are talking about reliability, this is the essence with which SREs are trying to operate at, or at least the true SREs.
So one of the things I find fascinating about social media apps, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, is that you put your phone down because you're not going to look, and you start to get this itch. And I call that itch the moment of maybe. You start to get an itch that maybe somebody's reached out to me. Maybe there's something there that I want to interact with. It's this moment of maybe that drives everything related to social media today. In fact, if you don't create this moment of maybe, you're going to fail as an application today. It's everything you do has to drive this idea that maybe I should pick up the phone because there's something that I'm missing. But when it comes to your sort of product, it has to be the opposite. That I can never be wondering if maybe there's an alert that I have to be looking at, or maybe there's a problem. In fact, if I'm using your product and I'm constantly opening up your app because maybe there's an issue, then I think you're on the opposite. You failed. I need to feel confident that if something's happening, I'm going to be told. I don't have to worry about the maybe of it all. It's really interesting. You're kind of on the opposite of this moment of maybe.
Yeah, I love that. I've actually noted it down, this moment of maybe, because everything is anti moment of maybe, and there are these tools that you got to deploy, like various kinds, like I don't go into the details of the business there, but there are these tools that you deploy everywhere which actually give that certainty and guarantee, and it starts by a lot of these things underneath, the reliance and the confidence that the observability data lake is going to support, which is why we had to build a time series database, because you know you're collecting all that data, building graphs, but what you realize is, hey, my underlying my underlying observability database itself is not serving 5 nines, so how can I deliver 5 nines on my software? Those decisions go into the making of it, to have these solve problems at every layer. Problem of collect data. How do we make sure that there's fundamentally a solid layer where we can actually have all the data that we can actually visualize on top of it, not just look and build these tools which are trying to extract knowledge to eliminate these moments of maybe.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, we are totally out of time, dude. And like I say with every guest, I could talk for another hour here, but we're out of time. And I love your story. And dude, I learned so much here. There's just the beginning of the picture not being what you want the world to experience, right? Digital, like that moment, these moments of your system trying to say there is no moments of maybe, because if there's a problem, we're going to know about it before anybody else. And you're going to know about it before anybody else. And not only that, you're going to have options to deal with this without needing to call a developer and go through that particular, like, I love all of that kind of stuff. So that's brilliant, dude. This has been for me, a great show. I can't wait to get back home and tell my wife some of the things that I experienced talking today. Thank you so much for all of that.
Thank you so much, Bill. I'm going to end it with a yes.
So if anybody wants to reach out to you after listening to the show, what's the best way that they can do that? And we'll also put that in the show notes.
Hello at last9.io is where you find me or all of us.
Brilliant. Okay, well, this was the Ardan Labs podcast with Piyush and Bill Kennedy signing off. Thanking you for joining us and hope to see everybody again soon.